I do want to thank Conservation International. We're going to start off with an inspirational video. Since we have a lot of different faiths here today, we didn't want to marginalize any group because everybody calls the Supreme Being by a different name. And if any religion set up here, they would call it maybe God or Allah or Jehovah or Brahma or Wankatakan. And we didn't want anybody else to feel like they're not a part of it. So we decided we'd start with an inspirational video about Mother Earth, which is the part that we're all a part of. And we ask you while you're watching that, if you would say a prayer to however you name the higher being, that we all learn something today here to help better protect our common home. And like I said, Conservation International made this video and they gave us permission to use it and even use it on the completed video. So we appreciate that. Let's see. I think since we're running short on time, I'm going to have to skip all the other thank yous. Gratitude goes out to everybody who made this happen. Our vendors who gave up their Saturday mornings to come in here and help you get more information about green organizations and businesses. The volunteers who are working here today. So, all right. Let's see. I do want to introduce, before I forget, Sister Janet Miller is our keynote address speaker. And she is the Mary Knoll missionary. Sister, do you want to stand up for a second? Yeah. The Mary Knolls happen to be a religious order that, because they've worked a lot with indigenous people around the world, and they saw that the respect and moral obligation that indigenous peoples hold towards the land, the Mary Knolls felt that was a very valid tenet to hold. So they have made that a major precept of their orders to be involved with environmental issues. Sister Janet spent many years teaching organic farming in Zambia, Africa. She's worked in the rainforest in Panama and other assignments too, but she was also, I think it was 9 years that you were co-director of the Mary Knolls Global Environmental Office. And so we're very lucky. She's a native of Evansville who went on to other places but came back to us today, and we're very, very glad she's agreed to be a part of this. And also we have a wonderful lineup of other presenters. I don't have time to name them all, and so we'll have to do that as time comes. I am not a normal speaker, so you're going to get David James for the rest of the day as the MC, and I'm glad we were able to con him into doing it, and you're probably very glad too. Okay, Matt.
I am home. I give you comfort. I shelter your family. See me for who I am. Home, sweet home. I am your refuge. I am the floor that supports you, the foundation that keeps you steady, the walls that give you shelter, the roof that protects you. I am your home. If you don't take care of me, I cannot take care of you.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Caroline, for the great introduction and our inspirational reflection. Like Caroline said, our time is a little limited, but when we talk about the environment, we won't be too concerned about time, about time. But I'd like to greet you. When I was in mission in Zimbabwe, and the people there, it's very important to recognize everyone in the group with which you've come into. Traditionally, I mean, if it's a smaller group and there's time, a woman would go around, hold her elbow, and greet everyone in the room. This is a great sign of respect and and our relationship with one another. But in a larger group, many of the people there, if the men, they clap with flat hands like this, and the women cup their hands. And we look around, and when we say the language, which is morohi, good morning, how are you? And so we can greet each other, like if the women like this and the men, and you can look around the room and try to, as many, wonder, to all. So thank you. That sent good energy into this room, and may our conversations and our greetings continue. Now, you know, I have to admit, I'm not a tech person, and my tech person here is Matt, so you might see help, because I've never really used a PowerPoint with this mouse or whatever, so I will begin. Okay, you might ask, why do I begin this with following a slide of this, that was surrounded by interfaith symbols, a picture such as this? Well, interwoven into my mission work has been teaching how to make compost. Compost is usually made by gathering plant material. You probably get some plant material such as leaves, grass, clippings, and vegetable peels, and you put it into a bin or open on the ground, and until this compost decomposes. And then, of course, then we use it then for planting in our gardens and for tree plantings or to enhance the soil. And I use this as a symbol. For me, then, this is a symbol of our oneness and our unity. And when it's all decomposed, we don't know what the material has really been, but it's been organic material. And today, I think a few of the people that have been on the planning committee have brought some of their soil from their places of worship or their homes. So I'd like for you to bring your soil, your compost, as a symbol of our oneness and our unity in creation care. So you can come forward. This is my sister Angie and Tammy. They will bring the bowls around. So these are some of our planners and our vendors and many other. And if anybody else has brought any, please. And today, at this Tri-State Interfaith Conference on Creation Care, each of you participating today and your faith belief are an integral part of our one earth, one community. Pope Francis reflects on the natural system in Laudato Si. He says, "It is hard for us to accept that the natural ecosystem work is exemplary. Plants synthesize nutrients which feed herbivores, and these in turn become food for the carnivores, which produce significant quantities of organic waste, which give rise to a new generation of plants." And today we give witness to creation care of our One Earth community. This morning, we reflect on our creation care, our common home. Some of our human actions in the past and today, unfortunately, do not always reflect positive creation care. And we have forgotten that we ourselves are dust of the earth. Our very bodies are made up of her elements. We breathe her air, and we receive life refreshments from her waters. Pope Francis wrote, "We have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production capable of preserving resources for present and future generations. while limiting as much as possible the use of non-renewable resources, moderating their consumption, maximizing their efficient use, reusing them, and recycling them. In June, when I said yes to Ann Ennis, who Caroline said planted the seed for this conference, and Caroline Nellis, we met. I happened to be here in Evansville, and they told me about their envisionment of this environmental conference. At that time, Pope Francis' encyclical was only being anticipated to be released later in June. So I'm glad that Pope Francis released that encyclical, because it's been a great help in preparation for my reflections, because he addresses that encyclical to all the peoples of the earth. So Laudato Si, which is praise be, on care for our common home, is a profound and awesome reflection and guide for people of our One Earth community to read and to put into action. Regardless of what faith we choose to follow, we are called to care for our common home, our One Earth, mindful that our choices show our awareness of the stewardship of creation, not only in the tri-state area, but also throughout the world. I invite you to join me in saying this pledge that's up here on the screen. This is the pledge that Pope Francis has in his encyclical. Together, we pledge our commitment to raising awareness of the stewardship of creation. Pope Francis follows this in a speech that he made in the Philippines, and says, "As stewards of God's creation, we are called to make the earth a beautiful garden for the human family. When we destroy our forest, ravage our soil, and pollute our seas, we betray that noble calling. We need to strengthen our conviction that we are one single human family." The theme of Pope Francis' encyclical was interwoven into an ecological conference that I attended at the Marino Mission Center in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where I was studying Spanish. I went in June until about December. And the theme of the conference was creation care for Mother Earth. And this photo, you can see me down in that corner, shows us in a circle around symbols of Mother Earth. And each person in our group shared his or her gratitude for Mother Earth. And I asked myself that question, and perhaps you are asking, why did Pope Francis write the encyclical that was given to us in June? I share this photo because of what I have seen in the mission countries that I have worked in or visited in relation to sanitation. In my initial mission experience in Tanzania for 4 years, in Zimbabwe for 13 years from 1982 to 1985, in Panama for 5 years, and my most recent 6 months in Bolivia, I have seen and visited people in areas where they have no running water or limited access to clean water and no proper sanitation. Pope Francis challenges us to make a personal or group response to living realities where people lack water and proper sanitation. He stated that each person has the universal right to decent housing, clean water, jobs, and an education for boys and girls. Today's reality is that 780 million people do not have access to clean water, and almost 2.5 billion people do not have access to sanitation. In October, while I was in Bolivia, I had the opportunity to attend the World's People's Conference on Climate and Defense of Life in Tiquipaya, Bolivia. And this is the town that was near where the Marino Language School is located. And interwoven into this conference was the right that each person has for lodging, land, and labor. And there, at this conference, it was attended by about 4,000 people. There were 12 working groups, and I participated in the group Interreligious Dialogue to Save Mother Earth. And participants wrote a position paper in preparation for the December Peace Climate Change Conference, or I think the Paris Climate Change Conference. And they said in this position paper that understanding that the Paris Conference of Peoples shall promote the signing of a new agreement on climate so that we, the peoples of the world, have to raise our voices again to offer our own visions and solutions to climate change. So this is what they wrote, and I think all of us here and all of you here today, this is our responsibility in our tri-state area to envision and the solutions to climate change and the degradation of our environment. So I think this will be a very interesting day as we share with one another. And Evo Morales, who is on the left, is the president of Bolivia, said at this conference, which included indigenous peoples and farmers, environment groups, and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who's on the right, that capitalism was one of the causes of climate change. I didn't go to that group because I can only attend 12. I mean, one group of the 12. But it was awesome for me to see that on each of the groups had a banner depicting their particular focus. And I think this message resonates with some environmental groups who argue only a transformation of the global economy can end the world's dependence on fossil fuels. And I always go back to what gives us hope now in our day-to-day life. And when I was in Bolivia, this photo is from Cochabamba, where I lived from June until December. And this is a water project to pipe water to all the areas of Cochabamba. Most of the water is in, of course, the more developed area, the running water. And the people, as we know in many of our cities, urban areas, many of the people from the rural areas are migrating into the urban areas. And of course, governments and local people, they don't have time to properly develop these areas that people squat on, and this becomes their home. In Bolivia, there is an area that people went to because of the shortage of land. People are building on the mountainsides. The government is providing roads and some proper drainage, education, but it all takes time. So now this water development project will give all the people in Cochabamba, hopefully, more access to clean drinking water. And with projects of hope, such as pipe water to all areas of a city, there are signs throughout the world that Mother Earth, our common home, is in pain. Pope Francis said, "Never have we so hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years. He continues, "The earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. In many parts of the planet, the elderly lament that once beautiful landscapes are now covered with rubbish." And I think for me, in my mission experience, this happens when consumerism and more man-made items are made available to people. The whole educational process of where is a way to reduce and reuse and recycle, that these are all, in many countries now throughout in the world, great programs that are being taught in the schools because of this, what Pope Francis says, that a lot of the rubbish that now appears along the oceans and our waterways, that's detrimental to our environment. And this slide shows the traditional blessing of Mother Earth. And the people of the Andes Mountains in South America are convinced that as children of Mother Earth, their mission is the responsibility with life according to what their parents and grandparents have taught them. They believe that they must be in very good terms with nature to keep themselves and their crops and their livestock healthy and protected. They have rituals to honor Pachamama, Mother Earth. And when I was in Bolivia in August, I participate in some of these rituals, but traditionally food is cooked and prepared. The visitors come, and before food is shared, they give some of a plate of food back to Pachamama, to Mother Earth. And there are rituals and prayers and blessings for doing this. And generally, when you share, like at that World Conference of the Conference of Peoples, whenever we shared a meal, they usually have some kind of fermented drink. And before we eat, we give there is a blessing given, and some of this then is put onto Mother Earth to show our gratefulness for the food that has been grown that we can now eat and share for our own nourishment. And I will continue to interweave signs of hope. Perhaps the question for each of us is to ask ourselves today is, what gives our tri-state interfaith community hope in our creation care for our common home? The 2014 New York Climate Change March that I participated in with 4,000 others gave me hope. Again, there were various groups, and one of the groups was faith-based groups. The Maryknoll Missioners for Mother Earth marched along with other members of those faith-based groups. And when we were organizing, of course, you got to go very early and we stand, but we were, I think, 4 or 5 New York City blocks long for our particular group. So, and I think maybe here in the Evansville area, many parts of the world, there was a day to prepare and to show our concern for the Mother Earth and our care for the earth. And this was all in preparation for the Paris climate meeting that was held just in December of last year. And this Paris climate, from that meeting, we now have the Paris Climate Agreement, which was approved by 195 countries. And when it was approved, the French foreign minister, who also attended that meeting in Bolivia, said, "None of us acting alone can be successful. Success is built collectively." In the context of powering a world without fossil fuels, Ban Ki-moon said, "What was unthinkable has now become unstoppable." So I think that is a significant statement that was just made in December in relation to our goals for that we need to do for climate change. In the Paris Climate Agreement, I'll just highlight a few of those. Among the goal, of course, is keeping the global temperature at least 2 degrees Celsius, or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, that the global temperature does not rise above that. And the real goal, I think, is far less than 2 points. But if that's achieved, scientists says it would ward off some of the worst effects of climate change, like rising sea levels, severe drought and flooding, food and water shortages, and more destructive storms. And I think wherever we are in the tri-state area, many of us have experienced, and we continue to experience, what climate change perhaps is doing in terms of our own weather conditions. Advocates to the climate change agreements say that wealthy nations should contribute $100 billion per year starting in 2020. Advocates say that this wording sends a clear message to the fossil fuel industries that much of the world's remaining reserves of coal, oil, and gas must stay in the ground and cannot be burned. The current language suggests that at least some fossil fuels can continue to burn as long as the greenhouse gas emissions are absorbed by a large number of greenhouse sinks like new forest. And I think this is, for me, important because, again, in many of the countries throughout the world, the forests have disappeared, as we sit here in the Amazon River Valley, many of the trees are being cut down. And I think this provision is the most significant recognition given to the role that forests play in offsetting human action. So whatever we can do to plant trees and to encourage the planting of trees in projects throughout the world will be a great gift to all peoples. And I think I've already mentioned that the burden must be shared by all, but especially the developed countries in relation to helping the developing countries. And this Paris Climate Change Agreement isn't something just for today or for the years to come. It is for many years to come. So they've agreed that this legally binding agreement, that every 5 years there should be a review of the efforts that are being taken by these 195 nations. And I think for many people in the world who live on the islands, that this is the first time that loss and damage has been in an international agreement. Because you probably have heard that with climate change, we've already seen this in photos, that the oceans are rising, and the first people to be affected by this will be the island peoples and the peoples who live along the oceans and our waterways. So not only will there be damage, but there also will be loss because the islands will no longer be. And I go back to my hopes that how can we change some of the climate change that is happening. That's by making goals real in people's lives, to actually do those action steps. Again, when I was in Bolivia, they are beginning projects for windmills and for solar panels. And with all development that is taking place, I think for me, a great concern still is sanitation and water. And with more than 2 billion people around the world, nearly 1/3 of humanity, they use toilets that are not connected to a sewer system. So poor sanitation kills 700,000 children annually every year. And that statistic is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the hope for some of these people is the construction of composting toilets. I think this is one solution that is beginning to happen. I know it's happening in Cochabamba, where I was, because most people of the world will not probably have toilets that are connected to sewer systems, and we know the implications of that in health care for the people, that this is one of the basic causes of diseases of people throughout the world. And of course, I bring this in because, again, along with compost, and has also been supporting and trying to implement the building of these composting toilets where I've been in mission. So this is, again, one of my great hopes and passions that more of this will happen. And how will this happen? It'll happen through the hope is for education, not only of boys, but also of girls. And creation care of our common home. I put this in. This is land of the Maryknoll Sisters community in New York. And on part of our land, we have made 42 acres is a land conservation easement. And a land conservation easement means that land can never be developed. It had the conservation value of that 42 acres is that it's woodlands and wetlands. So we promise, as Maryknoll sisters, to promote the biodiversity. And here in these photos, while the photo on the left is actually when we're making, I don't know what you call that in surveying, but the actual points for where the land conservation easement is. And the one on the right is showing we also have invasive plants. So to promote the biodiversity, we're gradually taking out the invasive plants and trying to restore the biodiversity of our woodland areas. And I'll just put one plug in here about Maryknoll. There are a few Maryknoll magazines, and this particular one is the theme is Caring for Our Common Home, and they're over there on the table. And Maryknoll also has short-term and long-term mission opportunities, volunteer programs, and mission outreach programs. And Ann Ennis here is involved with the Maryknoll affiliates. So if you're interested, please see one of us, because as Caroline says, we try to always interweave into our mission responses here in the United States and throughout the world the care for our common home. So in our tri-state area, creation care for our common home. Is there anything that you can do? There are ways to reduce our carbon footprint, and most of them save you money. And some of the vendors here today will have a lot of information, in our workshop sessions will give us ways to do this. So what are signs of hope for creation care in our tri-state area? And I think a sign of hope and care for our common home is when faith leaders, elected government officials, parents, teachers, children, students, all of us promote in words and actions ways to reduce our carbon footprint and to protect and share the resources of Mother Earth in sustainable ways. Bishop Charles Thompson of the Diocese of Evansville, in June 2015, after the encyclical Laudato Si was published, wrote, "The beauty of creation is evident across our 12 counties. Our diocesan shield includes representation of the Ohio and Wabash rivers, which serve as our southern and western borders. The rural nature of our diocese provides a bounty of God's natural beauty through all the seasons." And the bishop continues, "Throughout Laudato Si, Pope Francis honors the beauty of creation and offers thoughts on preserving it. He speaks as a pastor with a voice that transcends partisanship, often present in debates on climate change." So again, many of you here, some I know are educators, are people, leaders in the community. So whatever you can do to promote our care for our common home. And I bring this is our tri-state farmland, because I've talked about Mother Earth, and no matter where we are in the world, it's always coming back to our care for Earth. And some of you know the history of your family and community members who cared for and farmed the land, who were coal miners, or used natural resources in our tri-state area in the past and present. And I will just give one example, is my mother's family, the Fehrenbachers. They immigrated here, and some of them are here today over there. There are connections to my roots. And I think many, and now as we know, as we do our family trees, more and more of us are interrelated. So they immigrated in 1847 due to lack of sufficient farmland from the Black Forest area of Germany to the tri-state area north of Evansville, known as Armstrong, where the present churches of St. Joseph and St. Wendell are located. Where they were farmers. Like other farmers in the area, the Blankenbergers, the Kesters, the Rexings, they used horse or mule-drawn farm equipment, a wood-burning stove to heat the 2-story wood-framed home, cooked on a wood-burning stove, and drew water by a bucket from a well. And 3 generations of Fehrenbachers farmed the land. Peter, of the 3rd generation, he moved to Evansville, where he became the caretaker of Sacred Heart School. And you might ask, what is significant today at this Creation Care Conference, Care for Our Common Home? And what's significant is that with each of these 8 generations that came from 1847 to now 2016, is the increase in their carbon footprint or greenhouse gas emissions, along with their consumption of material goods. And so the hope for us today is that there are now viable options that are environmentally sustainable through appropriate technologies to use in our home, places of worship, and places of in our public buildings that will decrease our carbon footprint. And the food that and I go down to something that we all need every day is the food that each of us needs for our body energy has a carbon footprint, depending on things like method of growing, is it organic or inorganic, the distance from where it grows to where you live. And the hope is for our home gardens. Man, I'm sure some of you have home gardens, and garden projects such as the community-supported agriculture like Seton Harvest on the west side of Evansville. And they have, I didn't know they were going to be here today, but they have a table, so there's a lot of information about their project. And they have their project, it's certified naturally. They have certification as naturally grown. And this project is sponsored by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. So it's a wonderful example of how we can use our land to give witness and to support the community in organic food. And of course, the ongoing hope in creation care for our common home, wherever we are in the world, is each person's commitment to reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the goal is 0 waste. Unless someone has a creative way, when we throw something away, I think we always need to ask that question, where is a way? And just one practical example, I think, is the use of energy-efficient lighting in our homes, in our apartments, places of worship, and public buildings. It's kind of an easy and a cost-effective way to reduce our carbon footprint. And we always come back to that the climate is a common good, belonging to all and meant for all. And Pope Francis said, "We receive this world as an inheritance from past generations, but also as a loan from future generations to whom we will have to return it." And let us today go forward in our sessions, in the theological panel, and really reflect on how are we living today, and how are we projecting to leave this earth, this world of ours, for future generations. And some of these photos kind of show what some of the options, what our earth might look like. And hopefully it'll be, what we will leave will be an earth more like the picture on the upper left-hand corner. So I thank you, muchas gracias. And as we began our greeting, let us now, I think it's going to be a wonderful day. We are together, and to share on the theme of our conference, the Tri-State Interfaith Conference on Creation Care. Thank you.